Welcome back to the Orca Boat Shop. My name's Rod. So in this episode on the canoe build, I'm going to be marking and cutting out all of the scuppers, which are the drainage holes. So when you tip the boat a little bit on its edge, water inside will be able to drain. It also makes the inwales a little bit lighter and a little bit easier to bend inside the boat. So these are the seats that will be going in the boat with the framing. I've calculated out that if I space these scuppers 4 1/4 inches apart, and each scupper itself is 4 1/4 inches long, then these seat frames fit nicely between, sort of with a scupper in the middle, solid blocking for bolting the seat in, and then another scupper. So they're all nicely evenly spaced. I know on some boats, depending on where the seats need to be placed, there would be scuppers, then maybe a bit of a gap between scuppers, and then more scuppers. I like the uniformity of having all the scuppers the same size, same length, same spacing. So I've taken the inwales out from the canoe from the last episode, and I've got them on the workbench, and we're going to start by measuring and finding the center of the inwales and working our way towards both ends, marking the scuppers and how deep and what needs to be removed. So with the two inwales clamped together, kind of book matched so that the inner portion of the outer portion, which will contact the wall of the hull, are facing each other to the inside. And now just find, as we clamp them together, they should be, in theory they should be exactly the same length, but I'm just going to measure the full length of the inwales, which are, let's say, 16 feet exactly. And I will find the center at 8 feet and mark it there. Mark across both with my square, and I'm going to mark them both with a C for center line, so I know where that is. Now I'm going to start working my way out with the 4 1/2 inches. So I need at the center a solid block for the carrying yoke to be attached to, so 4 1/4 would be 2 1/8. So I would have a solid block here at 4 1/4, and we would mark across there. So we're not going to remove any material from that portion of the inwales because that's where the yoke will be. Then we'll start measuring from there, 4 1/4 inches. Here. And we'll just keep marking across both of them. And because the insert side portion here is the material to be removed, I just maybe make a line across here with my finger like so on both sides. It's just rough, and we know that this is the material that needs to be removed. If you don't mark it very clearly and taking them over to your table saw, it gets turned around this way, that way, you may very well end up removing the wrong material, and that's not going to work to make a whole other set. Okay, with the inwales all marked out for my scuppers, clearly marked where to take and remove material, there are several ways that this can be done depending on what kind of tools you have in your shop. Here I've got pretty well everything I need to use in power tools. The most common would be to get a nice new sharp Forstner bit that when clamped together would drill down, and this will give a so you're drilling half on one and half on the other. Being that these are 3/4, I wouldn't want to go any more than 3/8 of an inch deep, so that would be a 3/4 inch drill bit, but I find that a bit much to be going 3/4 into there. You're not leaving much material to either hang the boat or tie things to with ropes going through the scuppers. So this one is 5/8. I think that would be big enough. You'd have to clamp them together very tightly, and then best if you have a drill press and put your Forstner bit into there and then just punch a hole on either end. Once they're all done, you have nice clean corners and a hole in here. Separate them and then you would just take your chisel and chisel out all the material necessary and sand it nice and smooth. My method is going to be to take these to my table saw with dado cut blades and hack out as much material as possible with the blades set at less than 3/8, and then I take it to my router table with a round over bit and just completely round over all of these, so I'll get the same effect of the drill over here. The other method could be, if you don't really need or want the rounded edges of the scupper, then you really could just take if you only have hand tools, you could just make a bunch of curve cuts in through here on both of them by flipping them over, and then just chisel out. So you would have a square scupper versus a nice rounded scupper. Alright, got my dado stack into the table saw with a bit of space insert, and the final depth of cut will be less than 3/8. So I'm just going to set my table saw blades to maybe 5/16. So I'm not going to take off all the material with the blades. The rest will be done with the router to round over and clean up the inside edges. Okay, so I've just run a little test, making sure. I've just pulled this through the stack and measure, and we are under 3/8, which just leaves me a little bit more material inside here to clean up with the router table. So I'm going to do one inwale at a time. I'm going to be pulling these through, just hacking out. I don't want to come too close to the end because the corners need to be rounded out by the router table. What I also want to do is sort of just hold a piece behind here nice and tight, so as the blades, because I'm going to be pulling them through the blades, not pushing them through the blades. And I don't want the dado stack to just blow out pieces of ash on the back side here. So if I hold this in here, you could even clamp it together. And I'm just going to work my way down and then do the other one. I suppose I could put them both together at once, but I just find that a little bit hard on my hands and managing both pieces at the same time. So we're going to turn on the dados and just start cutting away some pieces. Okay, now that I've got the bulk of the material removed from the scuppers, a little rough, but what's going to be very helpful now as I put it through the router is I'm going to want to have these end marks on the other side as well. So I'm just going to sort of transfer lines across the top and down the other side. And the reason for this is that I have to switch the stock end to end as I run the router through it, because if I don't, the router is going to grab chunks of wood and tear them out. So the router is going to be, if I push it in this way into the router, it's going to be spinning this way. It's fine, it'll cut this corner nicely, but if I run across here, it's going to grab this and blow out this chunk of wood there. So I will end up having to flip it over and come around from the other side. Okay, so I've got the router all set up. I've done a bit of a test run, and it's just shaving off the bottom of the scupper here nicely with against my fence. So now I can just start to trim. It's going to get loud, so what I'm basically going to do is cut into here and then run across, cut back to that line, do all of the same, and then flip it end to end. With the routing finished, all it's left to do is clean up a little bit of the burn marks with a bit of sandpaper. Just got some sandpaper rolled around a drill shaft and slide it along and just clean up. Or if you're fortunate enough to have yourself an oscillating spindle sander, that'll do the job a little bit faster. Since I don't plan on gluing the inwales into the boat, I like to seal all of the insides of the wood with 2 coats of epoxy. This way, one, I don't have to try and varnish down and inside all of the scuppers, but also it's been my experience on boats that gunwales that aren't sealed on the inside will tend to rot from the inside out as sand and water and gunk gets all inside there, holds moisture, and although your boat looks beautiful from the outside, take it apart and find out that the inside is all punky and soft. So I haven't really sanded any other portions of the inwales at this point because there's likely to be a little drips of epoxy here and there. Once this is all cured, I'll just hit everything with the belt sander and then we'll round over the outside edges. Also, I'm using the slow 207 hardener because I don't want this to blush and or I don't want it to absorb moisture and kind of go white, which is what these faster curing hardeners might tend to do over time. So after sealing the inside of the outwales and the inwales, I'm just going to take my laminate trimmer with a roundover bit with a bearing guide. I could set it up on my router table, but that's a little more work. This is just a little faster. So we're just going to round over the bottom edge. So I've decided that these 2 sides are going to be the bottom of the outwales. So I'm going to round over the bottom. I'm not going to round over the top right now because there'll be a little bit of sanding anyway, so I'll round it over after fairing everything into the boat. So now I'm going to do the inwales. Just kind of got them clamped together here, and this is the underside of the inwales facing upwards. But I don't want to round all the way to the end because I'm going to be fitting a deck into here. So these are 3/4 inches thick. I'm going to put a 3/4 inch thick deck in there, and I don't want, a rounding of the inwales where the deck is going to be. So, I'm going to probably guess that my deck will be no longer than 15 inches from the end. So I just want to make a nice clear mark on here to not do any more routing past 15 inches. The deck will likely be 15 inches long on the edges, but less because there'll be a bit of a curve or some pattern shape in here. So with that in mind, we may even go a little bit longer than that because the sides of the deck can come down longer. Let's go 17 inches. I can finish off the rounding up the inwales and around the deck when it's installed. So now with the bottom edge rounded over, I'm just going to hit it all, the belt sander, clean up the bottom edge and probably the inside edge as well. Easier to do now than when it's on the boat. And that concludes this episode on cutting the scuppers for the inwales. Up next we'll be installing them into the canoe. And thank you to all my subscribers. You should consider becoming a subscriber too. By subscribing, you'll be notified of all the new videos that come up, or even hit that little bell button. That's going to even send you a notification as all the new videos are uploaded to Orca Boats.